Hey everyone, we have Chris Powers here from DxDao. He'll be doing a talk on reputation-based governance systems, a look into DxDao. If you have questions, just drop in the chat and I'll let him take it from here.
Thanks, Sinju. And as you said, I'm Chris Powers. I'm a contributor to the DxDao, and today I'm going to be talking about reputation-based governance systems. So before we dive in, I want to look at the things that predate blockchain governance. Where do we get the influence for blockchain governance systems? And so there's kind of three areas, I think. One, representative democracies. Two, corporate governance. And three, social movements. So representative democracies are the one that we're probably most familiar with. And by this, I mean the one person, one vote, and where elected officials derive their power, quote unquote, from the people. Then corporate governance, this is where shareholders themselves are the vote and their voting power is determined by the equity stake. And then last is social movements. Now, these might not strike us as governance systems, but they are some type of loose connection of informal decision making, and they represent some type of system. And so this would be things like the civil rights movement or the climate change. So for each of these, I think it's important to look at where they ultimately derive power. Where does power flow downstream from? So with representative democracies, as we said, power derives from the people. Elected officials have power, but ultimately they are accountable to the voters. For corporate governance, this power ultimately resides in equity owners, and that's their capital base. So the shareholders' voting power is determined by their investment or capital or the equity at stake. And social movements are, I think, the most interesting one. There are no power structures. There's no way for a leader of a social movement to enforce an action, but they do come with a lot of power. And it's my argument that these social movements are actually governed by reputation. So no one elected Martin Luther King as the leader of the civil rights movement, but he had a lot of influence in directing and coordinating action, mostly because of his reputation. When he would say things, people would believe him and coordinate around him. That reputation was built up over time, and it was a foundation for a social movement that kind of pushed a lot forward. And it's this last one, social movements, and that employ a reputation-based system that I'm hoping to focus on a little bit more today and how they apply to blockchains. So this is the thesis of the presentation. The best forms of blockchain governance will be those that manifest the informal governance of social movements in an on-chain system, rather than recreate blockchain versions of corporate or nation-state governance. Fair and efficient governance systems will employ a reputation-based governance model. So what is reputation-based governance? For this, I think we can look a little bit closer into DxDao. So DxDao, it uses a reputation system for governance and is built on the DAO stack platform. So in short, rep or reputation is not a token. It is non-transferable and can be slashed or burned. These properties make it very difficult to buy and sell rep. Even if someone managed to sell the Ethereum address associated with the rep, the community could slash or burn that rep. This makes rep closely associated with the actual off-chain actions to earn that reputation. Rep is meant to be an on-chain manifestation of reputation in the real world. Rep is issued by existing rep holders who will inflate the supply of rep, thereby diluting some of their own power. Now, there have been a lot of developments in governance on Ethereum over the last several years. I know a lot of focus is on the financial applications of Ethereum and some of the excitement around there. But separately from that, Ethereum really is pioneering some coordination methods here. Obviously, maybe the most famous or infamous version of on-chain governance is the DAO in 2016, which was launched as a venture fund to be managed on-chain, which was very groundbreaking in kind of pushing forward a lot of ideas, but of course came to a rather infamous end. MakerDAO, meanwhile, is managing a central bank on chain. They are voting to set interest rates every week. Moloch DAO is another progression in this. It is solely focused on funding public goods for Ethereum, and also pioneered the rage quit function to allow members to exit the community if they disagree with the decision. Of course, Aragon is building infrastructure for internet communities to use DAOs across the world. And then more recently, this year in 2020, DeFi has grown so much that it is also starting to innovate on some of the governance structures. So Compound in June launched the Comp token, and just before that, it actually transferred admin control of the protocol over to on-chain governance, and they can add assets, they can change the interest rate curves, and they can also manage comp rewards. And then YFI, for the Yearn Finance protocol, they have kind of pioneered, I think, an organic governance community, whereas Compound was an existing company that was trying to figure out how to manage itself on the blockchain. YFI created the governance system merely by distributing the token, by getting the token into the hands of DeFi enthusiasts around the world. That itself was the governance system creation there. So what do all of these developments in Ethereum governance that are well known, what do these all have in common? Of course, they all use capital-based governance. Voting power is ultimately determined by the amount of capital. So what are some problems with token-based voting? Obviously, governance can be bought and sold. Security analysts will tell you that governance is the largest attack vector, because of course, if you can control governance, by definition, you can change everything. So governance systems that have tokens that can be bought and sold that control governance power leave those projects and protocols susceptible to control by exchanges or something like flash loans. And so there's all these attack vectors that you need to build into your governance system just because you have a token that can be bought and sold and also controls governance. Voter apathy. It turns out that investors and speculators may not be that interested in governance. You give them this token and they're not necessarily buying the token to be good governors. They're buying the token mostly to speculate or perhaps invest for the long term. But what they tend to be interested in, regardless, is short-term price movements. So that's why you see some of the more contentious governance issues around creating some type of price action in tokens in the short term. And I think they're an impediment to decentralization. You know, anytime you have the governance system tied into a financial value, people are going to hold on to that more just because they want to hold on to the financial value of it. Now, taking a step outside of the blockchain land for a little bit, going back to kind of the internet at the beginning, I think we forget how important reputation systems were to, you know, moving more and more of our lives online and into the digital realm. So, you know, eBay really pioneered the creation of a reputation system for buyers and sellers. You know, the internet created the ability to be able to have auctions online and be able to sell goods across the world, but it didn't create the trust mechanisms that allow a buyer in Texas to trust a buyer in China. And that's kind of through eBay's reputation system was able to kind of pioneer that. Facebook, of course, in differentiating itself from MySpace and some of the other social media platforms, piggybacked off of existing reputation systems. So at first, only people that had certain college email addresses were able to go into the Facebook. And then after that, they very much focused on real world identities as a way to kind of use those reputation systems. Airbnb and Uber are another great examples of how hosts and drivers are trying to optimize their ratings and their scores because they realize how important those are to functioning and profiting off of that job. And that system was very crucial to again, why would people feel comfortable going over to some random person's house to sleep in their apartment or in a shared room? And it's only through these like reputation systems that kind of can inspire confidence to larger groups. And then I think the open source communities also employ a very loose kind of governance on GitHub and in the communities. And a little plug for a book I read there, Working in Public, because it also just has such a cool book cover that I think looks good. But open source communities themselves are also examples of systems that are or governance systems that are built off of reputation. Oftentimes you'll have a leader, a developer leader who, again, is not elected in any way. It just is that the community has decided to kind of follow him or her. Most blockchains actually also use reputation-based governance, is kind of my contention. So, of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Zcash have no on-chain governance, but that doesn't mean they don't have governance. There is a kind of there's still a lot of coordination and upgrades that need to happen for any of these systems to do, and they go through reputation systems. And so I actually think the development of each of these blockchain systems, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Zcash, their development was very, very closely to a social movement. Again, no one elected Vitalik, no one elected Satoshi, even though they started it. Their legitimacy, the reason people listen to them, is their reputation that comes from their past history of being very early on and kind of leading in a bunch of different ways. But these base layer blockchains, because they don't want to use coin voting, actually end up using reputation-based systems. Now, I think there's a whole bunch of transparency problems with this. As anyone who has followed these governance systems knows, that even if there is a system, it's hard because it's so opaque and based on reputation. It's hard to scale, and it's hard to kind of to be transparent about that. So, advantage of a reputation-based governance system: anti-plutocratic. Token-based voting will inevitably be governance by the wealthy, governance by the largest token holders. We can even see this with the fair launches. Yes, fair launches don't have pre-investors, but the allocation of those tokens and the allocation of the voting power is directly proportional to the size of capital. Someone with a large investment comes in to farm a governance token, and they're going to get much more than someone with a small amount of capital. Reputation-based governance also enables long-term thinking. When you have people that are not motivated or intrinsically linked to the price of the token, that means they'll be more interested in kind of building a foundation for a broad-based ecosystem. Dilution enriches governance capabilities. So this is one of my favorite things when it comes to reputation-based systems, because in crypto, there's an aversion to inflation. There is a fetish for scarcity. The idea that, obviously Bitcoin pioneered this, but for reputation systems, the systems as a whole actually get stronger when you extend reputation out, because you're picking the governors yourself. You're picking the governance structures yourself, while you're inflating and diluting the reputation. And I think it's this kind of process of growing the governance system through reputation issuance that I think is very important to kind of long-term decentralization. And then kind of lastly, it gives us the ability to coordinate around something other than profit. I think when we look at corporate structures now, and even the token structures we see on Ethereum, there really isn't anything other to do to coordinate than to coordinate around price goes up. Right? There's not any way of kind of finding some type of consensus or some type of broad-based agreement and try to push things forward. So I think reputation-based governance will kind of explore those areas. So obviously there are some disadvantages of reputation-based governance. I want to kind of be upfront about bureaucratic rule. which I just like as a phrase because, of course, everyone everywhere hates bureaucrats. And that's exactly what this system is ultimately saying. It's saying that the people who are governing the system and are working in the system, they deserve and have the best ability to um, control that system itself. And I think that obviously those bureaucrats can look to enrich their own power. They can lose touch with the broader society. Maybe there's no skin in the game or incentives for them to do that. Or reputation holders themselves actually control who gets reputation. I think you see this in American politics now, where you part of your political movement in general is to try to get more voters or restrict voters, because that's kind of a way of your winning the political game. And so here you can see something similar, where the current reputation holders become stingy and don't want to kind of extend rep. So just a couple possible disadvantages of the reputation-based governance. Okay, and then DxDao, reputation governance in action. So the DxDao launched in 2019 as a collaboration between DAOstack and Gnosis. There was 1 million rep distributed to 399 addresses. We were able to earn rep in 3 different ways. One was by staking ETH or certain ERC20 tokens. 2 was by trading on the Dutch X auction, which was a Gnosis protocol exchange. And then 3 was actually on a Gen for rep purchase. So Gen is the native token for DAOstack and is needed to run DxDao onto that operating system. So there was 1 million initial reputation issued then. And since then, there have been 40 new addresses that have received reputation, and that's been 370,000 new rep. So in just about 16 or 17 months, you've seen about a 37% inflation rate in rep, and that inflation rate is expanding the governance base of DxDao. So reputation is just control of the DxDao. It doesn't really have it doesn't have a financial value, and you can't really do much else. So actually in the initial stage, there was not a whole lot to do with DxDao. A lot of big ideas, but not ways to execute it. So reputation holders actually launched a fundraiser by issuing a new token, DxD, which is a claim on the revenue of DxDao products. And you can see here, from the fundraiser of DxD, there's actually a continuous bonding curve, and there's 22,000 ETH that's been raised from that, and the DxDao now manages about an $11.4 million treasury on Ethereum. It owns and governs Omen, which is a prediction market built on top of built on top of Gnosis protocol. Mesa, which is a batch auction decentralized exchange built on top of the Gnosis protocol. 2 other products that I just forgot to put on this slide. One is Rails, which is a front end for a layer 2 payment solution built on the Loopring ZK rollup. And then the 4th, soon to launch, is DxSwap, which is a governance-enabled fork of Uniswap. So kind of DxDao is positioning itself really as DeFi's governance layer. When I think about the building of new financial infrastructure, financial infrastructure in a lot of ways is a public utility, something that we all use, we all benefit from, and there are network effects to financial infrastructure. That means that it's hard for competition between different ones. We've had different models for governing public goods in the past. I think public utilities of electricity and water are one way, but I think we really need to think of a new way specifically for financial infrastructure. And financial infrastructure is, because it's capital based, there are increasing returns to larger pools of capital, and that's just kind of like an R is greater than G fact, right? That's just almost a base layer fact to financial systems. And I think it will really be important upon or incumbent upon us to find governance systems that can figure out how to kind of break through this, purely capital-based model for governance. If we do think financial infrastructure is something that should be used by everyone, should be open and accessible, rather than just controlled by those with the most capital. So that's it. I got some places to follow there. At DxDao is the Twitter handle for DxDao. If you're really interested in stuff, we have a banging Keybase chat that is better than any Discord server out there. I implore you to check that out. We discuss a whole bunch of things from governance to products to everything. You can follow me on Twitter at powers_Chris. I also write a weekly newsletter, mostly DeFi focused, Dose of DeFi, and you can check it out there, doseofdefi.com. And I will stop there and wait for questions.
Cool. So if anyone has questions, just drop in the Ask a Question tab. If we're going to wait a few seconds, and if we don't get anything, we can transition to the next session.
Cool.
Cool. Are there any common questions that you usually get about DxDao? Or
there is no legal, I guess there's no entity. There's no entity in the real world. DxDao is all on chain. So I think one of the kind of misconceptions is that kind of most places are trying, most projects in the space are trying to decentralize. They're starting out as a central entity and they're figuring out how to decentralize. But the DxDao is really unique in that it basically started out decentralized because it had this wide distribution of reputation, and then it's figured out how to kind of work through those restrictions and parameters. So really, it's as people say, it's coordinating around a pool of capital that's on Ethereum, and the only way to access that pool of capital is by passing proposals. And so I think that component of that distinguishes itself from, for a lot of other DAOs in the space. And to just give an example of that, DxDao actually owns and governs the front ends of all of its products. So it uses the ENS system for this, and it's hosted on the sites are hosted on IPFS, and then each proposal to change the website actually requires a proposal change. So it literally could not be taken down unless all reputation holders voted for that. I think there is a question. This is a very good question. Rep can only be gained by participating. How can a newcomer get started with DxDao? So if you're looking to get started, as I said, go to check out all our kind of communication channels. As I said, there's a great Telegram chat and Keybase, and that'll kind of get you up to speed. But we are kind of figuring out, well, what is the onboarding process? How do you, if rep is earned, how do you earn something before you're part of the system? And so right now we just actually started a new program about a month ago, six weeks ago, called Community Rep Boost. And in that, existing rep holders will kind of nominate different people that they think have been contributing in the community chats. Some people have been doing creating memes or something, and we will have rep boosts that will give rep to those individuals or groups. So last month, 10 addresses that we gave rep to. One of them was the community manager for the Telegram. Another was Delphi Digital, which has done some great research on DxDao, just kind of out of the blue, wanted to reward them for contributing to the system. Another was an investor who just came in, bought some DxD, and had a lot of ideas, but it was very helpful and just contributing to it. So we're trying to make sure that we can reward people that contribute to the community, but it's something I think reputation holders need to do a good job of actively trying to find new members and extend and issue new reps to them.
Awesome. Yeah, this was a really great talk. We're going to transition to our next session now, if that's cool.
Yep. Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, bye.